Lebanon, where a serial pager attack in the past 24 hours has caused immense panic. At least 11 people are feared killed. Most of these are Hezbollah fighters. There are also some civilians who've been killed, and over 2,700, by some accounts close to 3,000 people have been injured in this pager attack in different parts of Lebanon. Now, pagers are a one-way communications equipment. In the era of mobile phones, almost nobody uses pagers anymore, except Hezbollah bought a large consignment of pagers, hoping that Israel will not be able to intercept their communication. So in a pager, there's a command center that sends a one-way alphanumeric communication on that paging device to the receiver. The receiver receives that message on his handset, and that message then is actioned upon. You usually need a phone to call back, but in this instance, when that pager beeped, when that message came, it led to a large explosion. It led to an explosion. You can see those images on your television screen. An explosion in a mall. When the pager beeped, the person picked up the pager and there was an explosion. And this explains. Now, when the pager was tied to the clip on the waistband or the belt, it led to injuries on the waist or around the waist. In some instances, people had the pagers in their front pockets, leading to casualties below the belt. In some instances, they were looking at that message, and that's why there are some facial injuries in instances. Reports say Iran's ambassador to Lebanon was also injured in one such attack, pager blast. He did not have a pager on his person, but his security officer and a Hezbollah fighter, he had the pager. It exploded, injuring even Iran's ambassador. Explosions were reported not just in the capital Beirut, but later even in Bekaa and Nabatia and Bin Jibel and several other parts of Lebanon. If you collate where all the attacks have taken place, and several OSINT or open source intelligence handles in Israel have done so, it actually indicates the movement and location of several Hezbollah fighters. There are multiple theories how the blast took place. Some experts are not ruling out the possibility of tampering of pagers, and recently, just a couple of months ago, Hezbollah had purchased a very large consignment of these pagers. Was it a supply chain tampering issue, or was some kind of a battery with some chemicals and perhaps explosives inside that pager, right from the point that they were manufactured, or when they were in the supply chain all the way to Hezbollah in Lebanon and detonated by a remote control? So it appears, according to some, that there was a code that made the battery overheat, a malware in the pager operating system, which led to coordinated explosions late yesterday evening. The Hezbollah has now issued an official statement. They've called the incident the biggest security breach, and they've directly blamed Israel for the pager attack. Hezbollah said that some of their fighters have been killed in the explosion, and that Israel would have to pay a price for this aggression.
حتى الآن سجلت غرفة العمليات الطوارئ الصحية بوزارة الصحة العامة أكثر من 2800 جريح. حالة تقريبا 200 منهم هي حالة حرجة استوجبت إما إجراء عمليات جراحية أو إدخال على أقسام العناية الفائقة. وسجل كذلك سقوط عدد من الشهداء. العدد لهلا 8 شهداء بما فيهم طفلة عمرها 8 سنين بالبقاع. حوالي الساعة 3:30 من عصر اليوم بدأت أعداد كبيرة من الجرحى بالتوافد على المستشفيات، وكانت هذه الجرحى مصابة بشكل أساسي بانفجار بأجهزة اتصال بيجر كانت حاملتها. الأعداد اللي وصلت على الطوارئ كانت أعداد كتير كبيرة، وكان واضح أنه هي بمختلف المناطق
I can tell you that the U.S. was not involved in it. The U.S. was not aware of this incident in advance, and at this point, we're gathering information. We'll continue to collect information. I don't have any public readout to give now, but we're collecting information in the same way that journalists are across the world to gather the facts about what might have happened.
When it comes to the Middle East, that is something that we have spoken to before. We are always obviously concerned about that. This particular incident, I don't want to get into speculate about it or get into hypotheticals about it. When we think about the conflict along the blue line between Israel and Hezbollah, it has gone on for way too long, long enough, and so it is in everyone's interest to resolve it quickly and diplomatically. So we continue to believe that there should be a diplomatic resolution to this.
The pager blast, I can tell you, to my knowledge, there's no U.S. involvement in this at all. Again, it's something that we're monitoring. And in terms of potential escalation, I go back to what I said earlier in terms of a key focus for this department and the U.S. government writ large is on working with partners in the region, to include Israel, to prevent the conflict between Israel and Hamas from spiraling into a wider conflict. And that includes the tensions along the Israel.
A series of pager blasts across Lebanon. Most of these pagers were with Hezbollah fighters. The information we've been able to glean seems to indicate that Hezbollah had bought a large consignment of pagers just a couple of months ago. What was their aim? Their aim was Israel was able to intercept mobile phone communication. But pagers have a one-way communication system. There is no conversation. Messages could also be given in a coded form. And that is why the moment a message is given, the Hezbollah fighters would carry out the command. But what happened? Apparently, there was tampering of the pagers. That's theory number one. Explosives of some kind were either placed during manufacturing or when the pagers were being supplied to the Hezbollah, moving from their area of location through the supply chain. So maybe the supply chain was tampered. Explosives were in the pager for quite some time, and you don't need a large amount. Embedded switch could be triggered remotely. The message detonates the explosive in the pager, which is what appears to have happened. Hacking of pagers, that's theory number two. What does that indicate? That Hezbollah pagers were hacked by Israel's intelligence agencies, and the pagers emitted a signal that caused a blast, a message to appear, and that message was from the Hezbollah leadership, prompting every person to virtually around the same time check the pager. And in some instances, because people were reading, there are facial injuries. In some instances, there are injuries on the waist, around the waist, in the hip pocket or in the front pocket area if the pagers were kept in the front pocket. And that message activated the explosive charge leading to the explosion. Batteries, violent explosion is theory number three. The lithium battery overheated and triggered an explosion. But why would every battery overheat exactly at the same time or around the same time across Lebanon? In some instances, there are reports just coming in that some of the fighters had the same pagers of the same lot even in Syria. But then that would indicate that the consignment came from the same source and went to the same target. A bug in the pager caused the battery to overheat and triggered the explosive. That's the information that's coming in. So I have Danny DeCruz, Assistant Editor, Business Today, joining me on the broadcast. Also with me in a moment would be Pawan Duggal, one of India's best-known cyber security and law experts. But Danny, to you first, what are you picking up? What's the latest? The death toll at 11 and close to 3,000 injured. How could this happen?
Yes, Gaurav, as you rightly said, there are two possibilities. One being a hack, and the other being a problem in the global supply chain. So, roughly around 5,000 pagers were reportedly gathered in this one batch, where it is being said by Lebanese authorities that they were rigged with explosives. So now this also shows the vulnerability of the global supply chain of devices. But Israel, if Israel was behind it, it's also a possibility that it was easy for them to target the Hezbollah members because not a lot of people in this day and age use pagers. And it is
Yes.
being said that a single pager text was able to detonate that pager while they had it for months before. So they were using it as normally, and they were going through their normal scanners. But the experts are saying that it's very difficult to trace that kind of an explosive. And that's the reason it went untraced for such a long time. And it happened right at the moment when it was supposed
It
to.
just sounds too fantastic to be true. I mean, it's straight out of a spy thriller. Pawan Duggal, how do you look at it? I'll come to you in just a moment to talk about its implications for other countries, whether it can be replicated in a mobile phone, how safe or unsafe are our mobile phones, but that's in a moment. How do you look at this development in Lebanon, sir?
I look at it as a development as a manifestation of a cyber security breach. At the end of the day, it was the cyber security of the pager that was compromised to achieve the desired result. Well, first and foremost, Hezbollah was testing and relying upon a technology that's almost 2 decades old. Number two, at that point of time, cyber security was not a big thrust area. So a lot of loopholes and vulnerabilities were existing. And number three, the hackers or the cyber actors were able to come inside the said network of pagers and able to then implement and execute any command which led to this synchronized attack. I think it's a much bigger stuff. Currently, it's too early to say what's happened, but one learning is this has to be a wake-up call for every nation, for every digital stakeholder, because now any kind of a technology can be weaponized as a means of a cyber security breach to cause bodily harm, physical harm, apart from harm to property and stuff like that. So I believe it's a wake-up call, but a lot of things have yet to emerge as investigations surround this particular episode.
You know, since you say it's a wake-up call, the point I was coming to, if we were to talk about the Indian armed forces, if we were to talk about the police forces across the length and breadth of our country, a lot of mobile phones in our country, where are they manufactured? What kind of software do they have? Can there be a similar explosion triggered in these mobile phones? Is that even possible? Especially those who have these sensitive mobile phones in our country, or those who hold sensitive appointments in our country?
Well, Gaurav, this episode tells us that nobody is secure. Your mobiles in your purses or in your pockets are sitting time bombs that we are all carrying together. And now this new approach of misuse of technology is telling us that potentially nobody is safe. And in the Indian context, we don't exactly know where our mobiles are getting manufactured, what kind of a malware, spyware, or contamination is already fed in as part of supply chain, what kind of potential targeting can be done. So somewhere down the line, the ignorance is bliss paradigm reigns supreme in India. Everybody believes I can't be targeted, I'm good to go. But the reality is, today, you don't need to be a Mr. Tom, Dick, and Harry. You can just be a common person and yet still be potentially targeted. The idea is now with cybercrime as a service powered by artificial intelligence, predominantly emerging on the horizon, thanks to the developments of the darknet, this is now the way forward. This will be the new normal where these devices, communication devices and computers will be routinely targeted, hacked. Till now, we had only talked about hacking, but right now, it's going to go in the direction where hacking could lead to physical injury or harm or even death to the concerned persons. I think it's a huge wake-up call. Countries don't only need to have dedicated cybersecurity laws, cybersecurity policies, but more significantly, the need for inculcating cybersecurity as a way of life amongst all digital stakeholders has to be the urgent priority today.
You know, because Danny, sir, stay with me. What you've pointed to is something which is extremely, extremely alarming. You very rightly say it's a wake-up call for us. But Danny, till a couple of years back, what we were looking at was mobile phone batteries exploding. But those mobile phone batteries exploding was blamed on Chinese batteries, substandard equipment being bought, batteries being overcharged, left overnight for charging, and they would explode, and they did lead to injuries. But what this is happening is far more dangerous. If a battery explosion can be triggered from outside with either a phone call or an SMS or a WhatsApp, it just goes on to show how vulnerable anyone could be, Danny.
You're right, Gaurav. As you said that it's possible that a hack could do this, but till now there's no evidence of such a large-scale explosion being caused by a virtual software that just caused an overheating issue and caused a battery to explode. But remember that there have been cases where even smartphone batteries have exploded and caused even casualties.
Yes.
Like last year, there was an 8-year-old girl who died in Kerala because she was using the phone in close proximity. And there was another case where a 68-year-old man died in Ujjain, where he was also using the phone. Now, these small blasts also rely a lot on how the way you're using your phone. In a lot of instances, there have been injuries, there have been fires, but till now, we haven't seen something at this scale. But it has obviously opened our eyes to the possibility of something like this happening in the future. Say if a
Yes.
bad actor manages to push out some link which can download a malicious software, and then that manages to overheat the battery, which is possible, and then it explodes while you're using the phone, while the trigger has been set, and it's triggered when you're using it, so it can be fatal to you. But
And
this
in,
is
and in this
unheard of.
instance, if some spy agency is doing it, or if some hostile element, Mr. Dugal, is doing this to you, I mean, just imagine when we use our mobile phones, the kind of rights we've given away if we want to download an app. Anybody can access our pictures, they can access the mic, they can access the camera, they can access perhaps the battery and trigger that battery. Now, if it's happening, let's say to an entire battalion that's moving to the line of actual control, it doesn't need to cause death, it needs to cause more injuries, because for every one injured soldier, it would take 5 soldiers to take that injured soldier to the hospital. It would also mean that your entire medical infrastructure is overwhelmed even before a conflict has started. Does this mean that India should start manufacturing its own mobile phones 100% with no batteries from outside, with no hardware from outside, and software also has to be our own?
Clearly, India is now at a very important cusp or transitional point in history. Why? Because we've already become the most populous nation in the world. And let's put it, in the next few years, we are going to become one of the top e-commerce markets in the world. This progress of India is definitely not making other opponents happy. So state and non-state actors will constantly be taking various shots, doing various endeavors, so as to prejudicially impact not just Indian cyber sovereignty, but also the sovereignty, security, and integrity of India. Keeping that particular focus in mind, it will be of crucial importance that we start manufacturing everything indigenously. Our reliance on Chinese and other technologies need to reduce drastically. Unfortunately, today, the governmental ecosystem is infested with CCTV cameras that are coming from China.
Yes.
In India, the mindset that we should get something cheap or we should get a great bargain discount deal is something that's actually spoiling the way forward for a more cyber secure nation. I think everybody needs to be sensitized about the need for focusing on cyber security, more indigenous production of devices, more reliance on make in India products will ensure that at least India will be relatively safe when it comes to attacks on the sovereignty, security, and integrity of India, and that we will not be pawns or will not be guinea pigs in the hands of foreign state actors when they are themselves attacking our cyber sovereignty and we are left completely defenseless. So a lot of work needs to be done, hopefully.
Absolutely. You know, stay with me, both of you, Danny and Pawan Dugal, stay with me on this very, very sensitive story. And it's a story that has national security implications across the world, frankly. What Israel is accused of having done to the Hezbollah. The next big question that comes to mind, and I want our viewers to focus on this. Can your mobile phone turn into a bomb? That's the big question. The Hezbollah was concerned about the use of mobile phones. The Hezbollah was very concerned that mobile phones can very easily be hacked. And they also knew that something could be done to the mobile phone battery that would lead to an explosion. So cell phone IDs that have been used for a very long time, almost across the world. Mobile phones can be hacked via a malware. Mobile phones can be tampered with. They can be, set off remotely. Hezbollah, therefore, chose the pager system. It's 2 decades old. We used to use a pager in mid-1990s. 97, 98 was when we as young reporters had pagers, and this was only one-way communication. From a mobile phone, a phone call, from a landline phone, a call would go to a pager center. They would then transmit a message to us which we could only read, and then use a landline phone to call back for messages to be transferred. But imagine if this conversation was happening in terms of a coded message going to the Hezbollah from the high command. That's the big question.